Hi, I'm Joe Pizzillo, co-founder of Push.io, and in this video I'd like to show you how easy it is to get set up and running with our service to send push notifications to iOS devices. We're going to cover 4 steps in this video. 1. Getting your Push.io account configured. 2. Getting your Xcode project set up. 3. Provisioning. And 4. Coding and testing. Now that's a lot to cover in just a few minutes, so let's dive right in. Part 1. Setting up your Push.io account. If you haven't already, the first step is to create your Push.io account. Simply visit our website at manage.push.io and click on the sign up link to create your account. Enter a valid email address to get your invite, click on the confirmation link in the email you receive, set your password, review the agreements, and then you're ready to get started. Now the first time you sign in, you'll be taken to the welcome screen. So let's go check that out now. Okay. Now there are 3 steps here, the first of which is to download the Push.io mobile dashboard app for your platform. In this case, we're going to configure iOS, so grab the app for iOS and get it installed. You can also grab it off of the App Store. Once you have the app on your device, you'll need to log in to the mobile app using the same credentials you used when you set up your Push.io account just a little while ago. You'll see here on the welcome screen it says checking. We're using an app called Reflection to do AirPlay mirroring onto our laptop screen here, and I will sign in. All right. Now, back on the welcome screen, you'll note that that checking button has turned into the Send Now button. Okay. You can either enter your own test message here or just use the timestamp already entered in the field for you. I'll do that. Send Now. Now, over on the device, you'll see if the mobile dashboard app is running, an alert pops up letting you see the notification we just sent. I'll say OK to that. And if you want to see an actual push notification or one that comes up like the user will see it in a non-mobile dashboard environment, we just quit out of the app and send another one. Send again. And now over on the device, boom, up pops the push notification for the mobile dashboard app. Did you get the push notification? Great, then we're ready to move on. Now, if for any reason you didn't get the notification, then please refer to the troubleshooting steps on our support website and feel free to get in touch with us via our official support channels to let us help you out. Okay, now you're ready to configure your first app on Push.io, and that's step 3 over here on the welcome screen. In the case of our demo app here, we're going to create an app called Bird Watching. So I enter Bird Watching and then Add App. Voila, we now have our first app set up. Now once you've created the app, the next step is to add the platforms that your app is going to support. In our case, we're creating an iOS app, so I'll click over here on the left-hand side on Add Platform, and then click on iOS. Now each platform has to be configured a little bit differently, so if you're not doing an iOS app, you'll want to check out the documentation for the platform you're adding on how to set up an account with the device platform provider. At the bottom of the Edit iOS platform screen here, you'll see there's a button to Upload PEM. Now, iOS is one of the trickiest to configure for push notifications because of this PEM file requirement. So we've actually got a whole separate video for you to watch on how to create PEM files, as they turn out to be the cause of most of the issues that we see when people are having trouble with iOS setup. Really, even the smartest developers we know can have trouble with the PEM file step, so even if you're already an iOS expert, you might want to consider reviewing that video and follow along with the steps there to make your PEM file process easier. Since we're going to presume that you actually watched that video to create a PEM file, let's just keep going here with one that we've already created for our app. So I choose File, go to the desktop, here's the PEM file we already created, and I hit Choose, and then we are done. Okay, now once you've done that, you'll now have direct links on this platform page to download the Push.io Manager library for this platform, and a config file that you'll also need to download that has your API key already baked into it. The other thing you'll find here is a direct link to the integration guide, which we recommend you read through. But this video walks you through all those same basic steps, so you can save the integration guide until after we're finished here, and then you'll want to add some of the more advanced features to your app. Okay, with the PEM file created and uploaded to the Push.io web dashboard, we're finally ready to get our Xcode project set up. So, part 2. The Xcode project. Alright, so let's switch over to Xcode here. You see that we are using Xcode 4.5.2 for this example, but these steps should be pretty much the same no matter which version you're using. Now we're going to start from scratch with a new project, and since we're just making a simple app here, we're going to use the single view template in case we want to add any controls or on-screen info to our app easily. Choose that single view template and click Next, which brings up options for our app. All right, so for our sample application, we're making an app called Bird Watching. So I'm going to enter that as the app name. If you watched our PEM screencast, you know that we've decided our bundle ID will be com.pushio.birdwatching, but we can't edit that here, so we'll just accept the defaults for now. In this case, the devices set up are already for iPad. Now, push notifications, of course, works great on iPhone, iPod Touch, and iPad devices, but for purposes of this screencast, we're just going to make the iPad app. We'll leave all these checkbox options blank for now, then click Next. It asks us where we want to save the project. I'm going to put it on the desktop. We've already got one. We're just going to replace that. And voila, we're taken into the main editor screen for our new project. Now, one quick note. We named our project Bird Watching with a space in between, but that makes our default bundle ID here Bird-Watching. Your project may not need adjusting like this, but since we already generated a PEM file with the bundle ID com.pushio.birdwatching as one word, we're going to need to adjust our bundle ID here in the Xcode project. Now, as you'll discover, you can't just click on this and edit it, so let's take a quick detour to show you how to do that. The next tab over at the top here is Info. We click on that, and then we get this editor pane to be able to change some of the information in our info plist. You can also find this file over here in supporting files as your project name-info plist. Now again, this issue may not affect you, but if it does, you'll find that editing the bundle ID can be a little bit tricky. And here's how you do it. You see the bundle identifier is right here, and it's got a name like this, com.pushio.$product name RFC 1034 identifier. Well, this is where this is where it's set up so that the bundle ID will be the same as the product name, and that's what we don't want in this case. And so this is where we need to edit it as well. And I will change that to Bird Watching. Tab to make sure that's accepted. Save. And now when we go back over to the summary, you'll see that our bundle identifier is com.pushio.birdwatching, which is what we want. All right, now we're done with the bundle ID detour. Let's get back to the implementation. Since we've got our project set up here in Xcode, we've already built a PEM file, we've uploaded our PEM file to pushio, the next step is to add the pushio manager library and that config file to our project. So let's do that next. Let's switch back over to the pushio web dashboard here. And if you're not already on the iOS platform screen, if you were on a different screen, you just need to click back over here, and it will take you to the iOS setup screen. All right, now here we see that there's a few links. There's a pushio manager for iOS from GitHub. There's the config.json file, and a link to the integration guide. First steps here is we want the manager library. So we click on the GitHub link, and this takes us over to GitHub. And what you want to do here is grab this zip file. And that will then download it into our downloads folder. We go over here, we can open that up and find it. Brings a whole folder down, and inside of that is this folder, the pushio manager.framework folder. This is what we want to add to our project. So I go back over to Xcode, grab that folder, and drag it into my frameworks group. Now, when we do this, a sheet pops up, and most of the defaults are usually fine, but let's just review them quickly. For destination, we do want to copy into the destinations group folder. For folders, we want to create groups for added folders, and we also want to make sure that it's going to be added to our actual target here, which is bird watching. So with all that, we click Finish, and now we should see the pushio manager.framework over here in the frameworks group. It's okay if it's in a different place in your project. If so, you can just move it into the frameworks group. All right, next we need to get the pushio config.json file back to the web dashboard. Close out of GitHub. And we click on the download pushio config.json for iOS. That's also going to put it into our downloads folder. And let's go take a look at that. Now, if you've done multiple apps, you'll note that what happens sometimes is it'll do this suffix, the -1 suffix, because we already had one of these. That's okay. And even if you drag it into your project this way, that's okay. However, it's got to be named pushio_config.json. And again, we get the sheet of options for adding the file. These are all fine. We hit Finish. And over here now in our supporting files, we see pushio_config -1.json. Again, we can't have that -1. It's got to just be pushio_config.json. So I just rename it right here by deleting the -1. Now, another key thing here is when we click on this, we actually get to see the contents of the file. So, looking at this, you'll note that the bundle ID is here. And a key thing we want to make sure of is that we see that the bundle ID here in the contents of the pushio_config.json match the bundle ID of the project we're actually working on. And so we see that that's good. And now we're in good shape. So one thing I like to do, even at this point and along the whole projects, as we're working on the project, is to make sure that everything is working fine. And one way you can do that right now, since we haven't gotten any farther with adding push notifications, is run it in the simulator. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Click Build and Run. Now we can't actually test the notifications in the simulator, but this at least is going to show us that everything's hooked up and configured right where we are right now, that we're not getting any errors, the project builds okay, and so on. And we'll give that a moment. Over to the simulator. And moments later, it should pop up and run. And there it is. Now, of course, the view is empty. We haven't done anything to the project, but at least we see that it's working up to this point. It's come up and actually running. Now, as I mentioned, you can't test push notifications in the simulator. So we have to get our app onto a device to be able to test push notifications. And that means that it's time to plug in the device and build an ad hoc. Ah, build an ad hoc, you say, huh? Yes, if you recall from the screencast on PEM file creation, push.io uses the production APNS service. And that requires us to use distribution mode, not development mode. And that means ad hoc. Now to part 3. So, back to the Apple Developer Portal for a moment. Now, we've already got an app ID set up with the production push SSL certificate from which we made the PEM file. Next, then, what we need to do is go to the provisioning section of the provisioning portal and make our ad hoc provisioning profile. Across the top here, you see development, distribution, history, how-to. Again, we're making a distribution one, so we click on distribution. And here what we want to do is create a new profile. Now, this brings us to the Create iOS Distribution Provisioning Profile form, and we'll pick up here. So we want an ad hoc, as we've been discussing. The profile name is just a human-readable name. I'll call this Bird Watching. We want to make sure that we choose the app ID for this app, again, Bird Watching. And then we need to choose the devices that we're going to use. In this case, it's the iPad 3 I have connected here. And click Submit. All right, now when you do that, you'll note that you'll get this pending status, but all you have to do is just click Distribution again. And there's Bird Watching, and it's active. So we go ahead and download that, and that's going to bring it up over here in our Downloads folder. All right, when we do that here, we can just double-click on that, and that's going to bring it up in Xcode. The Xcode organizer should pop up, and we'll see our provisioning profile in the list there as a valid profile. Now, just a note, if your provisioning profile doesn't say valid profile and instead says something like this one here, valid signing identity not found, then you most likely have made your SSL certificate or your provisioning profile on a different machine or with a different user account from the one where you set up your developer account with Apple. This is actually a pretty common problem, especially when you're in a shared development environment, and unfortunately, fixing this problem is beyond the scope of this screencast. So if you have this problem, what you should do is search the internet for that term, valid signing identity not found, and you'll find a bunch of different articles to help you solve it. In particular, there's a bunch of good answers about solving this problem on Stack Overflow. Luckily, of course, we don't have this problem, so let's just keep going. All right, back in our project, we now want to go to the settings for the project. And over here on the build settings, we want to look at code signing. And it's down below, but I can just type in code sign here, and that'll bring up the code signing list. All right, and this is where we're going to use the provisioning profile that we just created. So if we click here next to where it says code signing identity, we'll get a list of all the possible provisioning profiles that we've got set up, and we'll find the one here for bird watching. Now, in particular, one thing you can do is just choose the automatic setting here for distribution. Remember, it's distribution we want, not development. Okay, if you don't see any matching ones in this list, then again, that probably means or is related to the same issue we just saw a little while ago, where the provisioning profile isn't actually valid at this moment, so you'll need to troubleshoot that separately like we were talking about above. But here we've chosen ours, com.pushio.birdwatching. You'll see your developer name there. And once again, we can do a build. And we should see build succeeded. Great. Now, if you want to go ahead and try getting it onto the device at this point, that is fine. Go ahead and run the app. Switch from the simulator to the device. And you can hit run. And we'll bring up the reflection here to see that. It'll take just a moment. There's the app. It comes up and it crashes right away. And over here in Xcode, we get this message that says, could not launch birdwatching, failed to get task for process, whatever process number it is. Now don't worry about this. This is actually fine. It's normal. It's even expected because you can't debug ad hoc apps using Xcode like you would with a development build. Really, you don't have to worry about this. We're going to show you in just a moment how to work around this. But for now, the fact that the app built successfully and then ran on the device, even if only for a moment, is a really good sign. So finally, we're ready to actually do some coding. Yes, this is the point we've been waiting for where we can finally take advantage of push notifications. Part 4. Yay! Finally, we're going to get to do some coding and see some actual push notifications in our app. So, are you ready to type a little bit? I know. If you don't really want to type, that's fine. You can copy and paste from the documentation, and I'm even going to do some of that here, both to show you where to find this stuff in the example code in the docs, and also so that I don't add any typos. So let's get the documentation open. I'm going to go over here and bring up the push.io documentation, which is at docs.push.io. And then we want the integration guide for iOS. And here's the URL for that, docs.push.io, push.io manager _iOS. All right. So here we want to scroll down to the portion of this guide where it says to copy the code below. If you don't want to actually do it, we can do a search here and find import. All right. Okay, so here, this first line is the header line that we need to put into our project to start taking advantage of push.io. So let's go ahead and copy this line. And then back in our Xcode project, we're looking for the app.delegate header file, the app.delegate.h file. And this is where we want to add that. Right here, after the UI kit import, we want to go ahead and paste that. Import push.io manager, push.io manager.h. All right. So next, while we're still here in the header, we need to declare that our app delegate is going to conform to the push.io manager protocol. So let's add this in our delegate section. That's here between the pointy brackets in the line that starts with @interface. We've already got UI application delegate. Let's go back to this. And we need push.io manager delegate. Copy that in there. Put a comma after UI application delegate, and then paste that in and hit save. All right. Now, like I said, I always like to do some sanity checking, so let's do a quick build. Now, when we do this, however, you'll see that we've actually got some warnings that come up. And really, the warnings are really just telling us that we need to add some methods in our code that are required to implement the delegate protocol correctly. So let's do that next. And what we want to do is switch out of the header file and into the .m file, or the implementation file. There's a variety of ways to do this, and one is that we can just click on the warning here, and we'll be taken over to the push.io app.delegate.m file, and we're taken right to the beginning there, telling us that protocol is not implemented. So let's do that next. All right, so first thing we need to do here is to start adding push notifications and push.io support to the application lifecycle. So let's scroll down and find the application did finish launching with options method. Now, this is the first where your application really starts. And since we use the Xcode template, you'll see that there's also some template code that's already been added there. So what we want to do is right before this, after the curly brace, but before the template code, we're going to put in some of this other stuff from the documentation over here. And that's these lines right here. Integrate the push.io manager into your application's lifecycle in the appdelegate.m. This initial setup and requested device token from Apple. So I'm going to select this very carefully, making sure not to get the beginning or end curly brace, and I do a copy. And then I go over to the Xcode project, and right there, do a paste. So let me tell you what this is doing real quick. The first two lines of this code, the set delegate and did finish launching with options, this is how we set up the push.io manager. First, it makes sure that we know that we want to be the delegate of the push.io manager, and that second there is to handle engagement tracking. And to do that, all you have to do is just pass that launch options dictionary back to the push.io manager. The third line there is what tells the iOS device operating system that we want to use push notifications at all. And then that what we want to do are use all three types: alerts, badges, and sounds. Now you may not want to use all three, so you don't have to include all three. They are ORed together here with the pipe. But for purposes of this screencast and getting set up, let's just go ahead and do that. Once again, I like to do a build just to make sure that everything's okay. We'll see build succeeded there, which is a great sign. But of course, we still have some warnings, and that means we need to add more implementation methods. Next, what we're going to do is implement the standard APNS operating system callbacks, which we can do from the documentation by copying and pasting the whole chunk that comes up next here. Implement the Apple Push Notification Service callbacks. And this, I'm just going to grab all of this, including the curly braces, and go back over here to my code. And since we're adding new methods, I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here and add some stuff after the last method, but before the @in directive. So make a little room there and hit paste. Give it a second. Now, what we did here is we added did register for remote notifications with device token, did fail to register for remote notifications with error, and did receive remote notification. That third one's actually optional as far as iOS is concerned, but you need it if you want to be able to handle push notifications when your app is already open. The other big benefit of copying and pasting from the documentation is that you already get these push.io manager methods in there, and all they do is piggyback on the existing or standard operating system code. So these are all in there now. We paste it in. And again, just make sure that you get those in after the last method, which ended there, and before that @in directive. All right, once again, I like to do a build. And this time, we've got build succeeded, but we still have a couple of implementation issues here because we still got to support the push.io manager protocol. All right, so back to the documentation. We're very close now. And here's where we grab the stuff for the push.io manager delegate protocol. Ready for registration, registration succeeded, and registration failed with error. Again, I'm just going to copy these, making sure to get everything from that opening dash down to the ending curly quote there. Go back into my code, and again, I want to go after the last method in my app delegate, but before the @in directive, and I'm just going to paste those in. All right, pasted. And now I do another build. That's just the way I like to do it. And build succeeded, and furthermore, we don't have any issues. See that? We've got the warnings done, and guess what? That means that we are ready to go. Now, we automatically, when we give the push.io manager the device token that we get back from the operating system, it's going to go ahead and register us for broadcast for this app. So we don't have to take any additional steps. And if we want to add categories, we can do that later, and you'll find out how to do that in the documentation and in future screencasts. All right, so with this succeeded, guess what? We are ready to run the app on the device and send our first push. So I'm going to do build, and then I'm going to do run. Now, we'll take a look over here. Look at that. Now, here up comes the standard operating system notifications dialog. Of course, we want to say OK here because that's the whole point of this exercise is we want to do our pushes. We get that same message we just talked about, but that's okay. We'll show you how to deal with that here in a second. But now, as of this moment, we should be set up and in good shape. Now, since the Xcode failed here, timed out waiting to launch, even though the app is running, this is a really important detail. And this is how you actually do the debugging of your ad hoc builds. Under the window menu here, we want the organizer. And when we bring up the organizer, we find our device. And over here under the device, we've got the console. All right? Now, we should see that it's all there. And we now take a look through some of these console messages. And importantly, what we're going to see here is that PushIO Manager has given us some information. We've got the API key in there. And importantly, we get this line here. Your PushIO testing device ID is, and then some relatively cryptic string. And what this really means, though, in the end, is that it's working. Sending registration lets us know that it went off to the remote server, and we should be in really great shape. Now, one thing that happens somewhat regularly is that maybe your device wasn't connected to the internet, in which case you might see an error that says something like push registration error, error domain NSURL, error domain code, the internet connection appears to be offline. So just make sure that your device is connected to the internet. And one way to do that, of course, is that see if you can load web pages in the browser on your device. Then, of course, once you get that running, you should see this set of messages, including sending registration with URL, and that's how you know that it's working. All right, are you ready? We're about to get to the really fun part. So now what we need to do to send ourselves a push notification is to go back over to the PushIO web dashboard. Remember this. Here we go. And with this, since we've run the application on the device, one thing we can do to check here is when we go to the Analytics tab, we should see that there's one active device. That's the device that we just registered by running our app. Okay, ready? Here we go. I go to push. I want to check all app subscribers. And then we want to enter a message like since this is a bird watching app, we'll do a rare Harris's sparrow was just sighted. I'll put even an exclamation mark. Then I click send now. And we go over here, and look at that. A push notification came up with a rare Harris's sparrow was just sighted. And that's it. You see we got the push notification. Congratulations, you've just sent your first push using PushIO. Of course, if you have any questions at all or encounter any problems in doing this, don't hesitate to be in touch with us using our official support channel via email to support@push.io. Again, that's email to support@push.io. I certainly hope this video has been useful for you, and now be sure to check out other videos in our series so that you can learn about some of the advanced techniques like being able to do push conversions and all the other stuff that's available through PushIO with your application. And thanks for watching.